Ellice Quentin, Julian Hawthorne. 1. A man about 34 years of age was sitting a few years ago in his bachelor rooms in one of the inns of court. It was a spring afternoon, warm for the season. The window was open, and above the high-shouldered brick buildings, a glimpse of eastern sky appeared, with a pinkish flush upon it, reflected from the sunset clouds in the opposite quarter of the heavens. Through the window were also visible the boughs of a tree upon which the bright green buds were beginning to unfold, and a couple of sparrows were chirping to one another as they fluttered from twig to twig. A muffled hush was in the air, peculiar to these London enclosures, into which horses and vehicles seldom enter, the roar of the great thoroughfare, though only a few rods distant, being almost inaudible to the occupant of this quiet chamber, while the light ticking of the clock upon the mantelpiece and the twittering of the birds were both perceptible to him. He sat heavily and motionlessly in his chair, a tall, powerfully built man, with gloomy brow and a thick, dark beard. In his right hand he held an envelope, which had been torn open, but after reading the enclosure, he had mechanically put it back. The envelope bore the name of Geoffrey Herne in a woman's handwriting and the London postmark. About half an hour had gone by since Herne read the letter, during which time he had been sitting as he was now, plunged in thought. His meditations had not, however, been occupied all that time with the subject of the letter, but certain passages in his past life had been passing in review before his mind, passages in which Ellice Quentin was the central figure. She was a slender girl when he first knew her, looking taller than she was, with strange grey-green eyes and a clear but bright colour in her cheeks. Her face was very attractive to some people, though it had no pretensions to regular beauty. The features were delicately but oddly formed, indicating a refined and talented but wayward and unaccountable nature. In her ordinary home life, and also when she was in the company of those she did not like, she was silent, repellent, and cold. But she not seldom, in favouring circumstances, kindled into brilliance of talk and action. And there was a vein of passion in her, which was itself the secret of her frequent coldness. Her lips, red as blood, were gracefully moulded and were perfectly under her control. By subtle modulations she could render them expressive of any emotion. Her figure was slight at this time, and scarcely as fully developed as that of most girls of her age, but she never made an ungainly movement or fell into an awkward position, and she had such a genius for costume that whatever she put on straightway seemed to become an organic part of her. Her wrists were slender and long, and her fingers tapered almost to a point. Geoffrey Herne had felt their touch upon his face as soft as the thrill of delight that at the same moment swept his heart. But that was not until many months after their first meeting, which was unromantic enough, Mr. Quentin having invited him to dinner to discuss some professional business. Herne was a barrister. Ellice had treated him on this occasion with undisguised superciliousness, somewhat to Herne's amusement at first, for Mr. Quentin, an obese and ineffective elderly gentleman, though he boasted of blue blood somewhere in his veins, was far from being in a prosperous or dignified worldly condition, was very poor, in fact, and thought of nothing but obtaining possession of some property to which he had a very questionable claim. Meanwhile, tradesmen used to present their bills with annotations at the bottom, intimating a desire more or less urgent to have them settled at once. Hereupon poor Mr. Quentin would wince and splutter, but Ellice, leaning back in her chair, with her hands folded on her lap, would meet his eye coldly and narrowly, with a sarcastic smile curling one side of her lips. Mr. Quentin would rather face a score of insolent creditors than that little smile of his daughter's. For Ellice was a natural aristocrat, far more than an hereditary one. She was born for a life of luxury and fastidious refinement, and her father could not help recollecting, at these moments, that he had thrown away £80,000 of money which should have been hers upon the turf. Nor had he the consolation of reflecting that Ellice was ignorant of this fact. Ignorant of it. He sometimes shuddered to think how many facts discreditable to him that cold, silent girl probably knew. She was not always silent either. She could utter agonizing remarks in a semi-jocose way. But let us do the young lady justice. It was within Mr. Quentin's memory that once, when he had returned home late at night after a miserably unsuccessful interview with his lawyers and had let himself into the house noiselessly with his latchkey, dreading to encounter Ellice's unsympathetic look, he had suddenly felt two slender arms drawn tightly about his neck in the darkness, and a hot and wet cheek pressed against his own. At that, the unfortunate man had broken into sobs. Ellice had tried to soothe him, and sitting on his knee, with her head against his shoulder, had spoken to him such words as he had not heard since he and his dead wife were young. But after a while she had fallen silent, and in the midst of an incoherent monologue of his on the subject of his wrongs and misadventures, she had risen abruptly and left him, with only a curt good night. She was a strange girl. Geoffrey Herne's first impression of Ellice had not been particularly favourable, and if she had behaved as most young ladies would have done under the circumstances, he might probably have never bestowed a second thought upon her. But her gratuitous arrogance, after amusing him for a while, began to pique him, and being possessed of an exceedingly keen tongue and wit of his own, he was tempted to enter into conversation with her. The dialogue which followed was probably worthy of a listener more intelligent than Mr. Quentin, the upshot of it being, so far as Herne was concerned, that he found it would require all his wit and more than all his temper to hold his own fairly against this oblique-eyed young lady with her curving scarlet lips. They parted that night on terms of almost open hostility, and Herne, as he went homewards, more than once found his brows drawing together and his lips compressed at the recollection of the things she had said to him. "She is a lady, though. Confound her impudence," was the sum of his mental comments. Her image was very vivid in his memory, unpleasantly so indeed. Not only that, but the intonation of her voice, her way of lifting back her head with a kind of haughty surprise when he addressed her, the gesture of her hands and shoulders, all were present to him. Moreover, he recalled one or two instances in which she had unmistakably had the better of him in the duel of words, and his face grew hot anew with a really disproportionate vexation. He would rather have made a fool of himself before the Lord Chief Justice of England than before that slender girl of 20. He then resolved that he would avoid seeing her for the future, but he finally modified his determination so far as to tell himself that he would first give her such evidence of his superior qualities as should make her regret ever having had the temerity to provoke him. As it turned out, this was a much longer and more arduous enterprise than he had anticipated, insomuch that after several months had gone by, he did not seem much nearer the consummation than at first. The antagonism between him and Ellice had been, superficially at least, constant and unrelenting. But meanwhile he had incidentally come to know her well, and he was too clear-sighted a man not to perceive that she was beginning to be indispensable to him. The discovery occasioned him much anxiety and inward struggle. His predilections had for years been against marriage, and he certainly had little encouragement to think that Ellice would ever dream of marrying him. One day, however, after a peculiarly bitter passage at arms, he rose and took up his hat to depart. He had something to say first, though, which had been on his mind for a week or two past. "You are going," she said indifferently, or rather with an air as of relief. "Yes, I am going, and, as I shall probably not see you again, I will say good-bye." "Oh, you have had enough of it at last?" "I am going to Australia." She looked slowly up at him as he stood near her chair, and looked slowly down again, while the colour gradually deepened in her cheeks. "This is really the most entertaining thing I have heard from you in a long time," she said lightly after a while. "It is the part of wisdom not to outstay one's best witticism," returned Geoffrey in the same tone. "So I'll be off at once. Good-bye." He held out his hand. "Good-bye," she answered coldly, but she did not look up or move her own hand. "You won't shake hands?" "What is the use, since we are never to meet again? If you are going, you can go without that." "Well, I suppose I can," said he, and after standing a moment, during which she made no sign except to draw one deep breath, he turned and walked with a heavy tread to the door. "Mr. Herne," he heard her say, as he laid his hand upon the latch. He looked round without speaking. She beckoned him to her with a movement of the head and hand. "Excuse me," she said, "but I think you have left something. Will you come back here a moment?" There was a vibration in her voice that was new to Geoffrey. He came back. "You were going away without shaking hands," she said, looking up at him with a curious smile. "You said that—" "Oh, well, don't let us quarrel any more. I am tired of it. Here is my hand." Geoffrey took it. How soft it was, and how cold. It lay lightly in the embrace of his fingers, but he could perceive a slight tremulousness in it, which seemed also to pervade her whole body. "You spoke of my having left something," he began at length. Her hand suddenly became alive in his and grasped it tightly. She drew it to her cheek that was as smooth as the petal of a lily, then slowly turned her face until her lips rested on it. All the blood flew tumultuously through Geoffrey's veins and sang in his ears. He was on his knee beside her and looking in her eyes, which met his for a moment and then sank. "Now go to Australia," she said in a whisper. "Ellice, Ellice, were you the thing I was leaving behind, my dear?" he said, bending forwards till his lips touched hers. After that, there could be no more misunderstandings. Geoffrey Herne did not go to Australia, either alone, as he had arranged to do, or with Ellice as his wife, as he perhaps might have done, for at this time she would have followed him anywhere in the world, or out of it. But it was decided that they should remain in England, where Geoffrey had good practice as a barrister, in addition to his settled income of £600, and be married in May, that is, in about 6 months. Mr. Quentin put on a portentous aspect when he was first informed of the affair, protruding his underlip and rubbing slowly behind his ear with his middle finger. He sighed and muttered something about having once anticipated a more brilliant future, no offence to you, Herne, of course, for his dear Ellice. But as a matter of fact, he was by no means averse to the match, if he had not actually done what he could to promote it. There is apt to be a good deal of humbug inwoven in the characters of elderly men who have seen better days and are not resigned to worse ones. Geoffrey perceived that Mr. Quentin desired to make a merit of doing what really was pleasing to him, and it was not in an expectant son-in-law's heart to object to that. So matters on that side went smoothly. To make the same remark regarding his relations with Ellice would be a triumph of understatement. These two found heaven in each other. "I was made to love and to be loved," she once said to him, as they sat together in the little parlour on Christmas Eve. "Be sure you make me love you enough." "If you had told me to be sure to love you enough." She smiled and said, "Never mind about that. That will be my affair. But I must love so as to forget everything." He was sitting on a low stool at her feet, his head leaning against her side. She let one arm fall about his neck, and her soft hand caressed his bearded cheek. "As I love you at this moment," she continued in a tender murmur. He took her hand in his and kissed the soft palm. "What is it you wish to forget?" he asked presently. "To tell you would be to remember. But I wish to know. I am not your wife yet. I shall not tell you. I wish to forget that I have only 3 dresses and that you are not the eldest son of an earl." Geoffrey leant back his head till he could see her face and laughed. "Don't. Worse things have happened," she said quickly. "Worse than what?" "Nothing. Do you think me beautiful?" "I love you too much to know whether you are beautiful or not. I used to think you were beautiful some time ago, I believe. You do not know what I can be yet. Loving you will make me seem beautiful, even to you. Is that why you want to love me?" "I don't know. It suits me. I wanted it. I wanted many things, but that most, at least now, don't you sometimes think it would be wise to die?" "I haven't thought so since I thought of going to Australia. That isn't what I meant. This is a heavenly happiness. There cannot be another so good. And yet we might try others. Sometimes I feel as if all the world would be too little for me." "I shall never want any other kind of happiness. I shall only want more of this kind," remarked Geoffrey, who did not know that Ellice was opening to him deeper glimpses of her inner self than anyone, than even she herself had ever before been in the way of getting. He did not know, and therefore, in the security of his well-being, he did not look. But long afterwards he understood. The weeks and the months went by, and the lives of the lovers grew to be more than ever one delicious life. Ellice's prophecy proved true. She did become more beautiful in every way. Her moods, her silences, her coldness were gone. She was even-tempered, blithe and tender. Her singular eyes glowed with luxurious light. The curving of her lips was eloquent of refined enticement. "Did any woman ever love as I do?" she sometimes asked. "Do I overflow your heart?" Geoffrey could have but one answer to such questions, and then she would add, "This is my world, darling. Keep me in it." When they parted in the evening, she would whisper to him, "I do not like to have you leave me. Something might happen." And Geoffrey, as he made his nightly way back to London from the little Putney villa, would image his coming married life in bright colours upon the darkness, and smile to himself at what he took to be Ellice's wayward or superstitious forebodings. "I am not going to be one of those sentimental dastards who are afraid of their own good luck," he said comfortably to himself. "Ellice is in the unsubstantial idealism of love as yet. When we really come together, she will forget her premonitions. Earthquakes do not seek people out merely because they are happy, and it would be more reasonable to suppose that those persons attract the lightning into whose souls the iron has already entered. Ha! That is rather a neat figure. I think that would be a good subject for a sonnet." This last observation will enable the reader to comprehend how hopelessly in love Geoffrey must have been. But he was not even embarrassed at his condition. He prided himself on it, as if no one had ever thoroughly sounded the depths of the master passion before him. No, neither poetry, romance, nor history were able to furnish him with a parallel to his love. He had practically invented it. "Not that I take any credit to myself for that," he would protest modestly to solitude. "No doubt there have been plenty of fellows who had as much capacity for love as I, or nearly as much. But then I always have the advantage of them in this, that I love Ellice. And that is enough to make a Titan out of a pygmy." In short, Geoffrey was well content, and convinced that the universe must have been, after all, created by a personal and benevolent God, though in his former days he had shared the doubts of the late Mr. Mill and others on that subject. He even found latent charms in poor old Mr. Quentin, who was the father of all fascination, and must therefore have it in him somewhere. Mr. Quentin talked about his claim after dinner with a sort of sapient vapidity of tone and phrase, and pointed out to Geoffrey how probable it was, after all, that his long baffled hopes would be realized. Geoffrey said that no doubt it was probable enough. He was thinking of Ellice, and arguing that a world which could produce her could surely produce so comparatively contemptible a miracle as the success of Mr. Quentin's suit. It would be little less than a miracle if it occurred. Geoffrey, who, from friendly motives, had at one time investigated the matter almost as thoroughly as a solicitor could have done, knew enough about it to know that. Nevertheless, he now, in the opulence of his felicity, agreed with Mr. Quentin that all might turn out as he wished. Mr. Quentin, who had great faith in the judgments of those who agreed with him, mentioned what Geoffrey had said to Ellice the next morning. Ellice, who was lifting spoonfuls of coffee from her cup and letting them trickle back again, replaced her spoon quietly in the saucer on hearing this and became meditative, with chin on hand and downcast eyes. "What would you do if you got this property, father?" she inquired after a while. "Take you up to London and present you to our gracious sovereign, and let you mingle among those to whose rank in life you were born," replied he eloquently. "As for myself," he continued, lifting up his double chin and settling his stock, "I should enter Parliament, and give the state the benefit of your experience of unpaid tradesmen's bills," interposed Ellice sarcastically. It was the old tone, unused by her since her betrothal, but a change seemed all at once to have come over her. Her father's underlip fell, and he stared at her in a piteously crestfallen way. She pushed back her chair from the table, folded her arms, and gazed intently at the fire. The silence lasted some time. At length she said slowly, still keeping her eyes on the fire, "I hope, for both our sakes, you will never get it." "For both our sakes?" began Mr. Quentin, with a remonstrative emphasis on both, but his daughter again interrupted him. When I say both, I do not mean myself and you, but what absurdity it all is. She broke off with a short, mocking laugh. I might as well hope that the Queen will not come out here this afternoon and take a cup of tea with us. Well, I must say, Ellice, that I don't understand all this, exclaimed Mr. Quentin, clearing his throat and pulling down his waistcoat with the air of a man who feels he has been unfairly attacked. If you care nothing for ease and dignity yourself, that is no reason why you should grudge your father the means of, comfort and consideration appropriate to advancing years. And hereafter, when I am gone— Ellice put up her hand, and a curious smile crossed her lips. You are too imaginative, father, she said, in a quiet, but no longer antagonistic voice. I am very matter of fact, and I can see that if what you wish came to pass, it would be the ruin of my happiness. And I dare say you remember that when I am not in a good humour, I am not pleasant company. For heaven's sake, do not let us mention this foolish subject any more. She got up and went out of the room, and Mr. Quentin, after standing for several minutes with his back to the fire, now putting his hands beneath his coat-tails, now thrusting them in his pockets, and now inserting his thumbs in the armholes of his waistcoat in the jerky manner of one whose composure and self-esteem have been exasperated, pulled from his breast-pocket a large leather-covered memorandum book, opened it, and applied his thick nose diligently to its contents. After a prolonged investigation, he closed it, and ejaculating, 15,000 a year, and got by a fluke. Why mayn't a fluke transfer it to me? And then, I fancy, I should see my way to a better match for Ellice than this affair with Herne. He buttoned his coat, took a cheroot from the stand on the mantelpiece, lit it, sighed, and walked out. It is always a question whether, after all our efforts, calculations, and precautions, the issue of events does not remain precisely as much beyond prediction as would have been the case had we forborne to disquiet ourselves. One grey, moist morning, towards the end of May, and about 3 weeks before the predicted wedding day, Ellice was walking along one of the suburban roads that lead towards London in a state of unusual excitement. Her eyes were fixed in preoccupation, her colour was high, and her lips occasionally moved, as if under the influence of vivid thought. Presently the figure of Herne appeared, coming along in the opposite direction, at his customary long, measured stride. It was his habit when he took a holiday to walk out from London to the Quentins' villa in Putney, and Ellice had expected to meet him. To Geoffrey, however, the encounter was an unlooked-for pleasure, and when he recognized Ellice from afar, he began to make gestures expressive of satisfaction. He did not notice that she made no response to them. When they met, he took her hand and kissed it. The road was only half a country one. Several houses were within sight, and he probably thought that a warmer greeting would be open to objection. But Ellice raised her eyes to his with a curiously intent look, in which there was a subtly enlightening expression, readable only to a lover, and which informed Geoffrey that he might follow the dictate of his heart. He was not the man to neglect such a permission, and he stooped and kissed her lips. At the same time he apprehended that some wheel or other must be out of gear. Women are seldom heedless of conventionality if their minds are serene. "Have you come to carry me home with you?" he asked jocosely. "Let us walk towards London," answered Ellice, slipping her hand through his arm and causing him to turn. "I am not going to be at home today." "Where shall we go, then?" "Anywhere. I don't care where. To London." "By all means. But then there is no necessity for walking. The train will be quicker." "No, I prefer to walk. For the present," said Ellice, speaking quickly and nervously, and pressing her companion's arm between her hands. "And how long may we be away?" "I never wish to go back." Geoffrey's face suddenly became grave. Her tone and her whole manner now confirmed him in his first suspicion that something was wrong. He glanced down at Ellice, rapidly passing in mental review all probable or possible causes of the difficulty. At length he said, "Have you had a row with your father?" "Yes. No, that is no matter. I want to talk only about ourselves. Do you love me?" "If we are going to talk about that, it will take some time. One day is not long enough for me to tell you how much I love you. Do you love me enough to do anything for me, or with me? She moved her free hand down his sleeve to his hand and repeated, Anything? I love you. There is no stronger word or thing that I know of, replied Geoffrey, feeling, indeed, an immense gush of tenderness in his heart, which his anxiety deepened. She made no immediate answer, but Geoffrey felt that she was full of restrained excitement, and he insensibly prepared himself for some kind of shock. In this short space he recognized that there might be much in Ellice which he had never known or comprehended. But there are so many things in the world, she broke out suddenly and vehemently. Why are they there unless we were meant to have some relation to them? Wealth and society and power and fame, to be able to go where you like and do what you will, to carry out all that is in your mind without any hindrance from mean and contemptible obstacles that degrade you as well as imprison you. How can one even love with one's whole heart if all those things are wanting? Are you sure you could, Geoffrey? I don't expect to have perfection in everything, replied he, beginning to feel relieved. But the question is whether all these things you speak of are better worth having than love. Of course, it would be pleasant to have both, but, as a matter of fact, most people seem to get either the one or the other, and not both, except those poor devils who get neither. Oh, I know it, I know it. That is perfectly true, though I don't know why it should be so. I don't think it ought to be so. She relinquished his arm and began feverishly to pull off her gloves. It is hateful to have to choose, she added. Luckily, we are spared that pain, at all events, remarked Geoffrey with a smile. Ellice stopped in her walk and, turning a little towards him, looked at him attentively. She had the air of mentally putting some alternative before herself and deciding which course she would pursue. She then walked on more slowly, with her eyes downcast. One thinks what one would do in such and such a case, even when it does not actually come to pass, she said. A great fortune is a great thing. It is something real. Suppose you had to choose between a great fortune and me. It would be choosing between a great fortune and a greater. Of course, I should take the greater, returned Geoffrey, feeling a certain intellectual satisfaction in his answer. But Ellice pressed her scarlet lips together, as if rejecting any merely complimentary or epigrammatical evasion of her inquiry. She was, in fact, more in earnest than he was, because he had come to the conclusion that she was merely disquieting herself, as women sometimes will, about an imaginary, not to say impossible, contingency. The best way to treat such conduct was to laugh at it. But you are a man, she resumed presently, and it would be different with you, because when a man has not got a fortune, he always thinks he can make one. But if you were a woman, in that case, I should get the man to decide for me. She came close to his side and once more took his arm. Yes, she said, speaking rapidly. Yes, to feel that a thing is done and cannot be undone. It is so terrible to wait, Geoffrey. Something might happen. You might die or... Geoffrey, I wish it were done. You wish what were done? Demanded he, looking down at her while his heart gave a bound. She made no other reply than to meet his eyes intently, the colour gradually overspreading her face. That we were married, he asked at length, in a low tone. She gave a sudden sigh, then a smile trembled across her lips for a moment, but without affecting the earnestness of her brow. Then something has happened, said Geoffrey, heavily and gravely. Tell me. I have told you. What more can I say? I am afraid. I want to be safe. I would have married you 6 months ago if you would have had me, said Geoffrey, almost coldly, for he dreaded lest passion should hurry him on to do something which, while for the moment satisfying Ellice, might in the end lead her to reproach him. It was difficult to think clearly at such a juncture, and yet something must be thought and said at once, for no lover can endure to seem in need of stimulus from his mistress. Does your father know of this? He asked. No, he would prevent it, she answered excitedly. Geoffrey, do not stop to think whether this is wise or foolish. Do not ask me. We are together. This is the time. But unless we have a special license, and that is impossible. Impossible! Ellice, you are not of age. She turned very pale and slowly let go his arm. You should not have thought of that. You do not love me." She turned away, and her hands fell to her sides. Geoffrey made no reply. For man of the world and strong though he was trembling all over and could not trust his voice to speak. "Goodbye," said Ellice presently, still keeping her face averted. "Look at me, my girl," he exclaimed, taking hold of her wrist, and at his touch she did look up at him for a moment with a singular expression, half wayward and half winning, which he remembered vividly for a long time afterwards. He continued, "We cannot break the law. If we love each other, we can marry in 3 weeks." She raised her other hand quickly, and he stopped. After a pause, she said, "Geoffrey, look at me. Look in my eyes, dear. I love you. Not in 3 weeks, but now." The tone in which the words were spoken made Geoffrey feel as if his ordinary life were taken away from him, and a new, perverted, delirious life put in its place. Instinctively, he sought self-defense in incredulity, but it was in vain. There was no mistaking what her eyes said, whatever construction might be forced upon her words. For an instant, a fire sprang up in his own eyes, but then, with a savage effort of the will, he dropped her wrist and said huskily, "No!" "Well, it is fate," returned Ellice with a light sigh. Presently she bit her lip and gave a little laugh. "How seriously we have been taking things. Anybody would suppose that we meant something. Goodbye, Geoffrey." "What do you mean by goodbye?" "Nothing. Only that I am going home, and that you are not to come with me." "Oh, you need not look solemn or angry, but I must go alone, really." "What?" "And I will write to you tomorrow and tell you why. Goodbye. We must not do more than shake hands on this street corner with that chemist's shop opposite and the wagon coming along. Goodbye until tomorrow." "This is strange," was all that Geoffrey could mutter. She went away from him, walking lightly and swiftly, turning her head towards the right or the left occasionally, but never looking back. Presently he saw something fall from her dress and flutter to the ground without her noticing it, and after she had passed out of sight, he walked slowly to it and picked it up. It was a little black bough. Geoffrey pinned it inside his coat. The next day he received the following letter. "You were quite right, Geoffrey, and I thank you. But I am going to make you hate me and despise me even more than you did then. We shall not marry in 3 weeks, or ever. It is better so. I suppose I was destined to experience both, the love of the world as well as your love. To try them both, I mean. I dare say I should never have been contented else. I am a strange girl, as I have told you before. It seems to me I have loved you as much as a woman can ever love a man, and if yesterday, never mind, we will forget that. I have not changed either, only that somehow yesterday seems ages away from me. I do not understand myself, and I don't think I want to. Perhaps marriage would not have come up to my ideal of it, and I could not have borne to be disappointed in it, with you. Perhaps I have had the sweetest that love can give. The other cannot be so sweet, I know, but I must try it too. It is fate. Ellice. The person with whom we have been having the lawsuit about the property died last week and left the property to us on condition that I married his nephew. And at the bottom of the page was added, "Do not hate me always." Geoffrey Herne took this shock with a serenity that surprised himself. Indeed, he got so far as to say, after a few days, that he was glad it had turned out so. Of course, he never answered the letter, and he never spoke to anyone of the episode of his engagement to Miss Quentin. It had been known to but few of Herne's acquaintances, and if they learnt the sequel, they were all too considerate or too cautious to discuss the matter with him, or in his presence. To tell the truth, he was not a very genial companion. He had always had a biting tongue, and now it had become almost venomous. Whenever he saw an opening for saying a cruel, witty thing, he said it unhesitatingly and without compunction, no matter if it were at the expense of his dearest friend. "I must have my little joke," he would reply, if any remonstrance were attempted. The men in his club began to fight rather shy of him. No one could get the better of him in repartee, and he was noted for never forgetting or forgiving a slight or an ill turn, even if it were unintentional. Herne will have his revenge if he waits a year for it, used to be said of him in reference to such affairs. It was worth nobody's while to be his enemy, and nobody knew how to be his friend. He saw very little of society, but he worked with vigour at his profession, and every month added to his reputation as a barrister. He will be QC before he's 40 if he keeps on, was prophesied of him by a certain learned judge, not given to reckless predictions. It was evident, therefore, that his love disappointment had done him no harm. One day, contrary to his usual custom, he accepted an invitation to a garden party at Lady Fulton's suburban villa. It was a gentle June afternoon, a year and a month after his last interview with Ellice Quentin. A broad rectangular lawn, soft and deep to the foot, was surrounded with tall limes and elms, whose voluminous leafiness cast grateful shadows athwart the turf. Beneath the trees a path lay in sunshine-fretted gloom. The house, with its balcony and open windows, stood at one end of the lawn. At the opposite end a marquee had been set up. A large sheet of canvas had moreover been pinned down upon an area of the level turf as a dancing floor. Chairs of designs more or less fantastic were placed in straggling groups along the shady side of the lawn, and these were occupied by men and women in summer attire. It was very warm, and bright-coloured parasols and fans made the scene lively as well as lovely. When the music began, the charm was complete. Geoffrey Herne, however, appeared to feel particularly morose, and spoke in a tone which, though punctiliously courteous, had a covert sneer underneath it. In reality, he was perhaps not morose. On the contrary, he may have felt a piteous forlornness at the heart, of which he was ashamed and which he desired to conceal. His hostess, a vivacious, Parisian-looking little lady, was paying him special attention and chatted to him inveterately. At last Herne said he must go home. Lady Fulton expostulated volubly, and ended by proposing that he should accompany her into the house and drink a glass of iced claret punch with her. Herne thought that would be as good a way as any of preparing his escape, and therefore he complied. They entered the parlour arm in arm. The change from sunlight to gloom rendered objects almost undistinguishable, and Geoffrey tripped over something which turned out to be the skirt of a lady's dress, and he made his apologies without discerning the features of the lady to whom he was making them. She had been sitting down. She rose hurriedly, but said nothing in reply. "Have you come for a freshener too, Lady Fulton?" said a man's voice, which for some reason immediately inspired Geoffrey with a feeling of aversion and contempt. "Who are you, pray?" "Why, Mr. Amadon, I declare," exclaimed the hostess. "And who is this with you? Surely not your wife?" "Incredible, but true," replied the other, with a short, cackling laugh. "Dear me, what is society coming to? I'm so delighted, so good of you to come. How do you do, dear? Oh, and let me introduce my friend, Mr. Geoffrey Herne, Mrs. Amadon. You ought to get on capitally together. You are both so sarcastic. We came to get some iced punch. Have you had any? Well, you must join us. Dear me, Mr. Herne, can you lift that jug? It's so heavy. Just a glass all round, and then I must run back to my guests. What a lovely dress, dear." "Capital punch, upon my soul," said Mr. Amadon as he set down his emptied glass. He and Lady Fulton chatted together for a minute or two, laughing and fencing. He was a youngish-looking man, with a flaxen moustache and pale grey eyes, rather red round the edges. His complexion was not good, and when he laughed his chin retreated towards his throat, and he twisted his shoulders. Geoffrey stood looking at him in silence. Mrs. Amadon had again sat down in a chair beside the table and was fanning herself. Presently Mr. Amadon expressed an intention of accompanying Lady Fulton back to the garden, and they went out, leaving Mrs. Amadon and Geoffrey to become acquainted, as Lady Fulton put it. When they were gone, Mrs. Amadon closed her fan and looked up. "Will you sit down by me for a moment, Geoffrey?" she said. "Of course you understand, Mrs. Amadon," said he, "that I should not have come here if I had expected to meet you. Then I am glad you did not know. I have wanted to meet you and talk with you, and after all, that proves me to be charitable, for people generally dislike and avoid those whom they have injured." "Without calling your charity into question, Mrs. Amadon," said Geoffrey, I may be permitted to relieve you from the burden of supposing that you have injured me. I should put it upon another ground, that we are apt to shun those who have benefited us. In an indirect way, I may have benefited you by keeping you occupied until Mr. Amadon was ready to come forward. She was looking at him while he spoke with her head a little on one side, her scarlet lips occasionally moving slightly. Now her eyelids drooped, and she sighed. "I have looked forward to this meeting often," she said, "and I was prepared to hear you say worse things than that. Perhaps, after all, you have not cared so much as I thought you would. I have no heart to fight with you, Geoffrey, as we used to fight in—" She paused. Her persistence in calling him Geoffrey produced an effect upon him. The sound penetrated far into him and set vibrating chords which long neglect had scarcely rendered less sensitive. He was further disturbed by her not attempting to defend herself. Not that anything could make her conduct defensible, but the blow that provokes no return loses half its virtue to the striker. And finally, it must be confessed that her aspect and propinquity were not without their influence. She was more fully developed, more beautiful than when he saw her last, and there were slight modifications in her manner and expression which were on the side of gentleness and sadness, and which moved Geoffrey to unwilling sympathy. Perhaps she had suffered enough to conciliate even his resentment. "What do you think of Mr. Amadon?" she inquired presently. "I have not had much opportunity of judging, but I should think," said Geoffrey, with diminishing bitterness, "that he would be a very suitable husband for you." It struck him as peculiar that Ellice, in spite of her culpability towards himself, did not shrink from meeting his eyes, or from introducing topics of conversation which might have been supposed at least as unwelcome to her as to him. But hers had always been a strange and unaccountable character. She opened and closed her fan, glanced out of the window towards the sunlit lawn, then back at him, and said, "Do you want to leave me?" A minute before, Geoffrey had fancied that he did wish to leave her. Now, for some reason, he changed his mind and dropped into a chair opposite her. "What do you want of me?" he asked. "Do I look the same to you as when you saw me last?" "You look better than you did then, handsomer, and you are more expensively dressed. And of course, the fact that you are one of the leaders and ornaments of society has its effect upon me. Geoffrey, it may not be often that we come across each other again. Why should we hold masks before our faces? We have been intimate. You have not forgiven me for leaving you. You have said to yourself, if she had loved me, she would have given up the world for me, and so you concluded that I was a hypocrite from the beginning. But if I had been a hypocrite, I would have married you, or I would never have let you know that I loved you. Probably I don't understand you, and never did. No man ever was your rival, Geoffrey. The world was your rival. But yet you should not be jealous, because though it drew me irresistibly, it never drew that best part of me that was yours. I could not have lived without the world, without longing for it, and I could not live with the world without longing for— Forgive me." "Take care what you say now, Ellice. You touch fire," exclaimed Geoffrey in a suppressed growl, with a glow kindling under his gloomy brows. She rose quickly from her chair, moved close to him, and laid her hand upon his. "Burn me, then," she answered, with a strange, tragic smile, and while they confronted each other, she continued, "My sin was that I preferred living falsely with the world to living falsely with you." "You made the world a bad place for me," returned Geoffrey, but his tone was no longer stern, and his hand now held hers. "I had but one love, unfortunately, and that was yours. But you have a husband." "I have a name," she answered carelessly, "which I wear as I wear this hat, because it is the fashion. Only the one is called a husband, and the other a hat. That is not the whole of it. You can change your hat tomorrow, but there is only one way for a woman to get rid of a husband." "What difference about him, Geoffrey, if you will be my friend?" "Your friend?" he repeated sharply, dropping her hand. "Oh, do not be angry again. No, no, not that. Do not ask me to do that. I am not so selfish, nor so wicked, Geoffrey, as to wish you to give up your life to what has not, after all, been wholly yours. I am not worth that. I only ask that you should be my friend. Help me to live so as to respect myself, What can I say? I know that what is past cannot be recalled. You can never feel towards me as you might have done if I had been less weak. But I am so lonely. I hoped you could— No, that won't do. Nothing like that, interrupted Geoffrey in a heavy voice. I am not a monster of virtue and self-restraint, Ellice, and I'm not a cur either. Do you suppose your husband would fall in with this arrangement? And do you suppose that I would condescend to sneak about his premises, having a secret understanding with his wife? Secret from him? It is true enough that there can no longer be a fresh and pure love between you and me, but there can be no friendship, because for good or evil I love you still. I can commit a crime, but I will tell no lie nor live one. Everything must be open and above board between us and the world, or there must be nothing at all. Oh, Geoffrey, this is terrible, murmured Ellice, letting her folded hands hang before her. In fact, she had not anticipated his attitude. She was a woman who wanted much, but who was not, perhaps, willing to go all lengths in order to get it. At the same time, she could not help admiring what he had said and liking him all the better for it, and she certainly did not admire Mr. Amadon, or passionately like the fashionable life which they led, and of which she had seen enough clearly to comprehend its limitations. Nevertheless, a woman who has achieved a position before the world will hesitate profoundly before abandoning outward conventionality for avowed outlawry. Compromises are more convenient, but how if a stubborn man persists in refusing to stoop to compromise? The compromise was in itself reasonable in the highest degree, if not also in the highest degree moral, but that evidently made no impression on Geoffrey. There was a sound of voices and laughter approaching the open window. Lady Fulton and Mr. Amadon were coming back from the lawn. Ellice took up her fan nervously and passed a hand over her hair. She had been able to entertain such reflections as the above, while the man with whose soul she had played fast and loose was standing, as it were, with the sword at his heart. He now spoke again, and the words in which he began made her start, for it brought back to her memory another scene of a year and a month before. Only this time he did not grasp her wrist. "Look at me, my girl. I will wait in the drawing-room of the Lansdowne Hotel this evening from 9 o'clock until 11. If I see you there will be no trouble in getting free from your husband. If not, never try to see me again. You will have done worse than murder." The others came in, full of badinage and liveliness. Lady Fulton protested that she believed Mr. Herne and Mrs. Amadon had been flirting. "Quite the contrary," returned Mrs. Amadon, smiling composedly. "Only we have been discovering that we knew each other long ago, and that I have lost the wager we made as to which of us would be married first. I will pay it now," she added, taking a white rosebud from the vase on the table. She went up to Geoffrey and slipped it into the buttonhole of his coat. As she did so, she murmured below her breath, with a glance into his eyes, "Before this fades." And then Geoffrey, with a very brief adieu, went out. There can be little doubt that when Ellice did that and said those words, she was resolved to meet Geoffrey in the Lansdowne drawing-room between 9 and 11 o'clock, and at all events she could not endure to be left in an awkward or unpicturesque situation. But unfortunately, it was then only 6 in the afternoon. 3 hours in which to wait, to reconsider, to doubt. It would be doing her injustice to say that there was not a struggle. The struggle was even carried to such a pitch that at 9:30 a hansom cab drove up to the corner of the street below the Lansdowne Hotel, and a lady got out of it, veiled, with a satchel in her hand. She paid the cabman, and then walked along towards the hotel. The broad bay window of the drawing-room abutted upon the sidewalk. A street lamp stood on the opposite side of the road. As the lady passed the window, she glanced up and saw a man seated there with a newspaper, which he was not reading, in his hand. Her knees trembled, but she said to herself, "If he looks out and recognizes me, I will go to him." Even then he turned, slowly, and looked out. She stood still, unable to move. He must have seen her, but he did not recognize her. After a moment he turned away. Then she faced about and ran back along the sidewalk, with what feelings in her heart, who can tell? The hansom had not yet gone from the place where she left it, and she was driven back to her house in Mayfair, where she was to receive some distinguished guests. Dusra, Geoffrey Herne's reflections were upon these matters as he sat in his chair on the spring day with which this story began. An interval of 2 years had elapsed since he waited for Mrs. Ammerdon in the drawing-room of the Lansdowne Hotel. During that period his professional success had been rather on the wane. He was as clever and sarcastic as ever, perhaps more so, but he neglected his work. He was morose and indolent. The stimulus to achieve great things was lacking. He conceived himself to have fathomed life and to have proved it worthless. "What is the odds what a man does? The devil is at the bottom of it all," he sometimes would remark. His more philosophical and healthy-minded friends detected something petulant or childish in this attitude of his, and the futility of their attempts to induce him to throw it off served to confirm them in their opinion. It should be understood that nothing definite was known about what had occurred further than that Herne had had a row with some woman. But other men have had rows with women and got over it. The letter which Herne had just received and read was not long, though it was sufficiently suggestive, and it may as well be given here. "Dear Geoffrey, I shall never see Mr. Ammerdon again. I wish to see you at once. I know you must have had hard thoughts of me, but if I had had you always with me, I should have always done what you wish. It is when you leave me that I lose my strength. That is the secret of all our trouble. When we are together, I always have known that I love you, and that I can never love anything but you. But when we are parted, other thoughts come. Sometimes I imagine that love is all imagination. Geoffrey, I have never told you what I did not know to be true. If you had only made me yours at first, even as I write to you at this moment, and think of my life since I saw you last, I half doubt whether anything is real of what I have felt for you, and yet they were the deepest feelings of all. I seem fated not to be happy, and yet I have tried ways of happiness more than most women. What is with me is real. What is away from me, you, are like a dream. But you are a dream that I believe in more than in reality, and I come to you in my trouble. Come and see me this evening without fail. I remember what you said to me at parting 2 years ago. At last I have done my part. I do not ask you to do yours, but at least come to me. Yours, Ellice." 2 years is a long time. Geoffrey had not forgotten Ellice, and her evil influence upon his life had not ceased to be operative, but he had ceased to feel the need of her personal presence. He had grown so accustomed to the wrong of her desertion that this had become more necessary to him than she herself was. After a while we make friends with our grievances, and would be at a loss were they suddenly removed. An hour ago there was nothing that Geoffrey would have desired less than to hear again from his lost Ellice. Nor was this all. Within the last 3 weeks a new element had come into Geoffrey's gloomy life. He had admitted it in a mood of self-contemptuous indolence, but since then it had worked upon him gently but powerfully, and was now on the way to make itself an unlooked-for resource and consolation. It had aroused a sentiment of gratitude in Geoffrey's heart, which, by and by, perhaps, would develop into something warmer and more tender. It had invested his future with a subdued but brightening light, so that he had doubtfully told himself that his latter days might be happier than those which were past. Now, above all things, he wished for no change, no disturbance. Nevertheless, it was at this moment that the change and disturbance had come. He could feel, stealing subtly through his veins, a lawless and reckless heat, which he remembered but too well, though it had long been a stranger to him. These written pages came from her, had been touched by her hand and caressed by her breath. From them seemed to proceed an insidious mist, blinding his eyes to honour and leading astray his judgment. How great and unaccountable was her power over him! It had not always been for evil. Not so at first. No, at first it had been the purest and loftiest emotion of his heart. But now that it was become evil, it was not less strong. It was stronger. Still, it might be resisted. It should, it must be resisted. Geoffrey pulled himself out of his reverie and stood upright. After glancing confusedly first this way and then that, he went to the tall secretaire between the windows and unlocked one of its inner drawers. Out of the drawer he took the black silk bow and the dried rosebud. which, at different times, had come to him from Ellice. Of late, he had often thought of destroying these relics, but he had put off doing so, adducing many arguments to justify himself in his procrastination. Now, however, the thing must be done, if it were to be done at all. Geoffrey brought them and laid them upon the letter which he had placed upon the mantelpiece, after once more taking it from its envelope. After a pause, he folded the letter about them and grasped the little bundle in his hand. The next moment, he quickly replaced it on the mantelpiece and faced towards the door. Had not someone knocked? The knock was repeated. He strode heavily and wrathfully to the door and opened it. There stood a woman dressed in black, with a red rose in her bosom. She immediately threw back her gauze veil, but before she did so, he had recognized her. Moreover, in spite of the utter surprise of her appearance at this place and hour, it seemed to him that he had been all along secretly expecting her. With a sort of dogged sullenness, he made way for her, and she came in without hesitation and with perfect grace. "We are together again, Geoffrey," she said, when he had closed the door, facing him as he advanced towards her. She took a hand of his in both hers and added, "Yes, you are real. You see, I would not wait. It was not worthwhile to risk anything more." "You are too late by some weeks," answered he, looking over her head at the wall. "Why?" "Ah, you mean that you don't care for me any more." She let go his hand and looked at him askance. Geoffrey, though he was thinking of far different things, noticed that she was paler than he had remembered her, except that her lips were scarlet as ever, and to the beauty of her face was superadded a depth of expression distinct from its natural feminine mysteriousness. He suddenly fetched a deep sigh, like one who is oppressed, and then he walked to the mantelpiece and rested his elbow on it and his head on his hand. "It is not necessary," said Ellice, after a pause. "I did not even expect it. I have done you too much harm, a great deal too much. But it is partly for that reason that I came. Whatever there is left of me belongs to you, if it can be of any use to you. I would like to die in some way that would make you forgive me." "Forgiveness is a word which children use," replied he. "It is never anything more than a word. The only thing I could not forgive you is that you have come in my way again." A light sparkled in Ellice's eyes, and she smiled a very little. For although the superficial significance of the words was repellent enough, she could discern the essential, reluctant flattery underlying them. It was not because she was odious to Geoffrey that he wished her away, but because she was too much the contrary. She was safe, therefore. "Let us talk together this once," she said, "and afterwards, if you like, you need never see me again. May I sit down here with you beside me? How happy we might have been. Do you wish me to remember that you are a married woman?" he demanded sullenly. "You seem to think that everything is a game and a plaything. Can you alter or take back what you have been doing these last 3 years? What have you done with your husband? Do you remember a thing you said 2 years ago, Geoffrey, when I asked you to be my friend? Well, there need be no secret now. I mean never to see Mr. Ammerdon again. I don't care what society says or thinks. He has made it impossible for me to live with him. I don't blame him, for he never could have had much satisfaction out of me. Poor creature. He knew from the beginning that I cared nothing for him. It was merely an arrangement on account of property, and I consented more for my father's sake than—" "You need not take the trouble to say that to me," interrupted Geoffrey with a harsh laugh. "No, I will tell you the whole truth," she said, leaning back in her chair and surveying him attentively. "I have always told you that, so far as I knew it. But now, for the first time, I think I know it all. I thought I needed something more than your love, but it was a mistake. I had not had enough of it to know what it could be. That is all. Mr. Ammerdon has at least taught me that. He has taught me by showing me all that it is not. I used to think there were so many pleasant things in the world that no one pleasure, not even the pleasure of your love, could make up for the loss of the others. But I have found that no pleasure can be really enjoyed except through love. One might as well save money for dresses by going without food. What is the use of fine clothes if you are dead? Do you intend to divorce your husband?" Ellice looked down for a moment at her hands, then glanced up with a smile and nodded. Does he know of it? Number. He does not know where I am at this moment. I left him suddenly yesterday in Paris, but he cannot help himself. He has no defence. Well, and after you have got your divorce, what then? Ellice was looking straight at Geoffrey when he asked this question, and for all answer she gave him another of her strange, unexpected smiles. Geoffrey stood up. This scarcely disguised avowal that she believed her power over him to be undiminished so far defeated itself as to give him strength for at least temporary resistance. He took her letter with its enfolded contents off the mantelpiece. 2 years have made more difference with me than they seem to have made with you, he said. I don't pretend to be as fresh-hearted and as ready to begin life over again now as I was then, and perhaps I can give you the friendly counsel today which you expected of me that afternoon at Lady Feuilleton's. You will make a great mistake, in my opinion, in leaving your husband. He can be of more use to you than anybody else can. The longer you live, the more of that sort of help you will need. You will find it more inconvenient to give up the world than it was to give up me. My advice is that you take the next train back to Paris. I will go if you send me, replied Ellice, rising with an unhurried movement and standing in slender gracefulness before him. If that advice comes from your heart, Geoffrey, I will do even that for you, if it will make you happier. But will you be happier? Am I grown ugly and hateful to you? Look at me, Geoffrey. You used to think my lips were beautiful. Look at this, returned he, breaking out into fierceness. He unfolded the letter and showed her the black bow and the dried rosebud. These came from you. I have kept them till now, but at the moment you came in I was going to burn them, and let that part of my life be annihilated with them, for I had begun a new life, which they dishonoured. Why do you come now? You promised to come before that flower faded. Did you think it was immortal? You have kept it all this time, said Ellice softly, drawing a deep breath. Then, perhaps, it may not be too late to make it bloom again. Shall we try, Geoffrey? His eyes and face glowed. He felt himself drawn towards her as by the strong current of a river. Their hands met when, as if by some sudden impulse independent of his own will, he uttered the words, "We cannot. I am going to be married." At first it seemed as if this announcement had produced no effect whatever upon Ellice. She continued to clasp Geoffrey's hands, and her gaze was untroubled. But presently she began slowly to grow pale, until her whole face was quite white, while her eyes darkened until they appeared black. Her lips fell apart a little, and it was with difficulty that she moved them to say, I did not hear. What was it?" Geoffrey did not speak again. It was with a conscious effort that he held himself upright and looked at her. He wished this were over. Ellice now slipped her hands from his and drew them back against her shoulders as if they had touched something unwholesome, but all the while she kept questioning him with a gaze half incredulous, half wistful. At last, however, and all at once, the full significance of what he had told her seemed to leap into her mind, charging her features with a vivid and sinister expression, the like of which Geoffrey had never seen in her before. It ended in her laughing somewhat shrilly and sitting down again in her chair. She felt nervously for her handkerchief, and having got it, pressed it several times to her mouth. "You took me quite by surprise," she began in a thin voice. "You are really going to be married. How dramatically you brought it out. May I ask to whom?" "No name that you have ever heard," said Geoffrey stolidly. "And you have been engaged to her long? You love her passionately, of course?" "We have been engaged about 3 weeks. She deserves the best love." "Yes. I didn't mean to pry into your tender affairs. Geoffrey, have you kissed her? Often, I mean." "Yes, 100 times," he answered, between his teeth. Ellice gave an involuntary shudder and made a gesture as if to shut out what he had said from her ears. The emotion brought the blood surging and tingling back to her face. She turned her head aside and remained for some time with her gaze fixed upon the wall. Geoffrey ventured to make no sign, for he had tried his resolution to the uttermost and knew too well where another struggle would leave him. Yet, At heart, perhaps, he grudged himself a victory so much less sweet than defeat would have been. At that moment, Ellice was for him the only woman in the world. He was ready to fall at her feet. He felt as if all the outrage had been on his side and all the suffering on hers. At last, she got up, outwardly quiet, save for the deep flush in her cheeks and the sparkle in her eyes, which travelled over Geoffrey occasionally as she spoke, but never rested steadily upon him. "You have made me feel ashamed of myself," she said. "I think you should have told me this news at first. No, I take that back. I broke in upon you uninvited, but it was because I did not think. You must believe that I am not so unwomanly as to have done it if I had known." She paused, buttoning and unbuttoning her glove mechanically, her lips moving silently. Finally, she looked up and said in a fresher tone, "May I ask you one favor?" Geoffrey moved his head in silent assent. "I shall go away. I shall go back tomorrow evening," she went on. "You see, I am wise enough to take your advice now, but I want very much to see this lady before I go. You need not be afraid. I should say nothing that could pain her, but you can understand why I should like to see her. I suppose I may tell you, for you must know it already, that she is the only woman in the world whom I can feel an interest in seeing. When I picture you to myself hereafter, I want to be able to picture her too. Will you bring her to see me tomorrow, before I go? Tell her that I am an old acquaintance of yours, a married woman, who feels an interest in what concerns your happiness. Will you come with her?" "Oh, Ellice," said he, in a broken voice, "I will come with her. Or if you say so, I will come without her." She seemed to hesitate for an instant, drawing in her breath and sending him one swift and penetrating glance. But the next instant she answered quite composedly, and as if she had not understood the significance of his avowal. "Oh, no, come with her. I should like to see her. Thank you. Now I will go. Goodbye till tomorrow." And before he could take her hand in farewell or find words to speak, she had retreated to the door, opened it, and passed out. It was dark when she departed. Geoffrey lit no lamp, but after locking his door, he sat for many hours with his head on his hands, and everywhere, standing forth against the gloom, he saw her slender, supple figure, her fascinating, wayward face. The changes of her voice murmured in his ears, and the desire of her ruled his heart and mind. It was not with the feelings of a triumphant lover, proud to exhibit his mistress to envious eyes, that Geoffrey Herne presented himself with the girl he was to marry at Ellice's apartments the next day. Not that Gertrude Hamilton was in any respect a bride to be ashamed of. She was handsome, wholesome, and serene, full of kindliness and common sense, pure in thought and upright in deed. She had given her whole honest love to Geoffrey, moreover, and having done so, she had as little thought of changing as the moon has of ceasing to be the earth's satellite. So short a time ago as yesterday forenoon, Geoffrey had seen his way to a life of sober happiness with her. But now he could only think, "She is not Ellice," and he shunned to meet her quiet, confident look, and could not respond frankly to her conversational advances. He felt himself a cheat, and inwardly kept repeating to himself the ominous question, "How will it end? How will it end?" Mrs. Ammerdon received her guests with a charm of cordiality that at once produced a favourable impression upon Gertrude. She was dressed in a flowing tea-gown of some oriental stuff which became her especially well. There was colour in her cheeks, and her manner varied between languor and what seemed restrained excitement. But a certain rare feminine sweetness pervaded all. On the table by her side was a silver salver, holding a decanter of wine and 3 glasses. These glasses, which had already been filled to the brim with wine, were of Venetian design, each one of a pattern different from the others. The room was in half light and furnished sumptuously. Ellice addressed almost all her questions and remarks to Gertrude, never meeting the latter's eyes, but occasionally glancing at her with great keenness. To Geoffrey she scarcely spoke, and when he addressed her, she would reply to him, as it were, through Gertrude. Geoffrey had noticed that she had avoided shaking hands with either of them at meeting. And, as he sat observing her, the fantasy now and then seized him that she was not a tangible human being of flesh and blood, but a beautiful wraith. There was a refinement and a sensitiveness in her gesture and aspect as of one who could scarcely have part in the vain, self-seeking world. And yet what an odd commentary upon this appearance her actual life, as far as one could know it, had been. After a while she said, rising, and speaking with more vivacity than she had shown before, "Now I am going to ask you both to take a glass of wine with me." Gertrude thanked her, but said she seldom took wine, unless for medicinal purposes. "Oh, but let me beg of you to make an exception this time," returned Ellice, with singular earnestness. "I have set my heart, yes, my heart, upon your drinking with me. Do not refuse me. I shall never have the opportunity of asking another favour of you." She took up the salver as she spoke, and held it towards Gertrude with the 3 glasses upon it. "Choose one," she said. "I am superstitious. I cannot let you off from this. Take whichever you like." "Certainly, if it will oblige you," said Gertrude, smiling. "I suppose they are all the same wine. I will take this." And she took the slenderest of the 3 glasses. "The wine is the same," observed Ellice, "but the glasses sometimes make a difference in the taste. Well, you have chosen. Now, Geoffrey, it lies between you and me." Her hands trembled a little as she presented the salver to him, so that the glasses jingled and some of the wine was spilt. "Quick," she said in a whisper, and he took the glass with the curved brim and the snaky stem. As she set down the salver, her hand was steady again, and when she raised the remaining glass between her fingers, not a drop was spilt. "You remember the last time we drank together, Geoffrey?" she said, looking directly at him now for the first time. "I shall never drink wine in my life after this. I am glad you and Gertrude have chosen as you have done. It is better, much better. You had your free choice and left this for me. I drink to your health, my friends." She drank her glass out and set it down. The others followed her example. "It is very good wine, I'm sure," remarked Gertrude. "You will get no harm from it," replied Ellice, tremulously and smiling. "Nor will you, Geoffrey, and it will be good for me too. You will—" She began to tremble so violently that she could not stand, and sank down in a chair. "You will think kindly of me," she went on in a scarcely audible voice. A strange alteration was rapidly creeping over her features. Her lips quivered, her eyes dilated, and there was a choking in her throat. Geoffrey, who, for the last few moments, had kept his eyes fixed upon her searchingly, suddenly flung himself down on his knees beside her with a hollow cry of anguish. "Ellice, you have poisoned yourself," he cried with thick utterance. "Could you not have forgiven me enough to let me go too? You had your chance. It was death to one or other of us 3, she answered with difficulty. "Fate chose me. Oh, do not trouble me now. I am content. Of what use have I ever been in the world? She is better for you." "What is the matter? Can I be of any help?" inquired Gertrude in concern and perplexity. For a minute Geoffrey made no reply. Then he rose stiffly, kissed the dead woman's lips, and turning away from her, but not towards Gertrude, answered heavily, "None."